proceeds of the sports fund, which are clearly supposed to support sports for these two institutions in the supplementary budget that will be coming to this House. Is it in October or November? I think in October. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me also commend the CS for those very elaborate answers. But Honorable CS, I see you have completed a number of stadia and some like Wanguru, Jomo Kenyatta Stadium in Kisumu County, which you say you have completed and handed over to the county government. Kirigiti Stadium in Kiambu County, you say you hand it over at the end of October. Wanguru Stadium, the same, is awaiting signing of MOU and handover. My concern, CS, is once you hand over this stadia to the county governments, the government of Kenya has invested billions in some of these stadia, and I have the case in mind of Kirigiti Stadium. What measures is your ministry taking to ensure that those stadia will not be run down out of poor management by the county governments? I don't know whether the MOUs you are entering into with the counties include an oversight mechanism by the ministry to ensure that you maintain a certain standard and level of our regional and international stadia. Because, for instance, Kirigiti is a stadia that could also be used for some of the international games under AFCON and CHAN. But if we leave them to many of our county governments, they will be run down in a year or two. They will look like community grounds with no seats, with tartan torn, the football pitches not usable, goalposts looted and sold to scrap metal dealers. I would really want to hear what measures you have to ensure that there are even penalties to county governments, to ensure that there's a mechanism where you're able to periodically check the status of each of the stadia that have been developed by the national government, that they are maintained at the same standard. And any county government that is not able to maintain, then you must have a recourse measure to ensure that that stadia can revert back to the national government and the sports stadia to manage if as a particular county government is not able to manage and maintain the required standards. Thank you.
Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and thank you to the CS for giving us elaborate responses. I have a follow-up question on the question on elaborate preparation for our national teams. And the question I want to ask is, the other day we had the beach kabaddi team that was going for World Cup that got really delayed in terms of their travel. And one of the complaints that came out from them was that on the day that they were actually traveling for World Cup is the same day that it was beginning. Why weren't they given priority? And the second part of that is in terms of the FKF elections, which is very close to the CHAN championship. And I just want to know, with this very close proximity, are we really ready to have the elections and also ensure that we do have CHAN with the FKF being properly involved? Thank you.
Zamzam.
Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Spika. Swali langu kwa waziri, tunajua FKF karibuni watakuwa wanapiga kura zao. Nataka nikuulize, watawezaje kupiga kura bila kuwa na appeals committee? Na kwa nini ile board ya uchaguzi iko katika himaya katika wale ambao wanawania katika sehemu yake? Ni kama vile president anataka kura lakini ile IBC iko ndani ya State House. Itakuwaje uchaguzi wa haki? Na kisha nikuulize, kanuni vipi ambazo umeweka kuhakikisha kuwa ile standard ya FIFA imefuatwa kwa mpango wake? Na mwisho, Mheshimiwa Waziri, huku mashinani watoto wamekuwa wakicheza mpira, lakini hao watoto wanachangiwa kama maskini. Watoto wanatoka Mombasa wataka kuja Nairobi kwenye tournament, wanachangiwa mpaka saa zingine sehemu ya kulala inakuwa shida, wanaenda kulala kwenye mavaranda. Sasa mimi nauliza, kama tunakuza talanta, mbona tusianze kuweza kuweka pesa huku chini? Hao watoto wakitoka watoke na nguvu, wakijua hichi kitu tunaelekea sehemu ambao ni nzuri. Asante sana.
Razo. Vida Razo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Waziri, my question is on the issues of unfinished studies. It has taken, like Marsabit and others you have indicated, they have taken inordinately long time, 7 years, 6 years. And once you have closed out those facilities, the people who would have used those stadia, they don't have even space to play football or any other sports. I think in the realm of time, would you have a sort of time frame that by this time we'll be able to finish these works? The other issue also on that is the issue of regional centers of excellence. I find that you are biting more than you can chew because you have too many projects ongoing, and yet you could focus on having, for this region, maybe something in Isiolo for Upper Eastern, for example, or for Northeastern, you have something in Garissa, so that the few shillings that are available to you, you focus and finish a project. Maybe your comments, Waziri. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
CS, let him respond to those 5, then we take another round.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think for my senior Honorable Karoli, I think he's reiterating the position as it is, considering that he's a member of the committee. Mr. Speaker, so far I am not aware of any plans to wind up Kenya Academy of Sports and ADAC. In fact, ADAC is impossible to wind up, the anti-doping agency, Mr. Speaker, because it's a requirement of international agency. For us to operate as a country sports facilities, we must be very careful how we treat ADAC. And therefore, for ADAC, I'm very sure about that. For the Kenya Academy of Sports, though it may be possible that there might be a conversation between that and the Sports Kenya, I am not aware at the moment that that has been progressed beyond just basic proposals. The issue we have a problem with is to have a very important grassroots agency having zero money. It's unbelievable, unfathomable, that at the moment we don't even have money to pay their salaries, let alone to carry out any project. So for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I will continue. We have had this conversation with Treasury, and I want the support of the committee and the House, the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that these resources are reinstated to run these very important agencies. As I said, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, a ministry like this and others I know that deal directly with human development are rarely supported, Mr. Speaker, with the resources that they have. Luckily, the Sports Fund has been able to support activities that are being done by various sports agencies. But we need to ask ourselves, in terms of development, and unfortunately also Sports Fund cannot pay for salaries and emoluments it is not allowed to be used to pay for salary and emoluments of agencies. So we are now in a situation where we ask ourselves why you could have an agency having zero. I plead on behalf of these agencies that we get your support. We have already had this conversation with Treasury, and I believe that when the proposal comes here for supplementary, this will be restored. In terms, the majority leader has asked a very important question, and it is a problem that we are grappling with as a ministry. The question is, once you hand over these facilities to county governments, what happens, Mr. Speaker, if they do not maintain? First, Mr. Speaker, that's why I said there has to be a conversation with Council of Government.
It is not if, it is when. They are never maintained, so there's no if.
Mr. Speaker, let me give the counties a benefit of doubt because, and I'm saying this because
very few.
So far Homa Bay County is doing very well with their stadium, which they built themselves, and it's, Mr. Speaker, fairly being well maintained. And the Deputy Speaker is saying it's because of a woman. I don't think that's the reason only. Mr. Speaker, the thing I would like to say is that the MOU we are going to sign, that's why Wangoru has not been handed over, is because that MOU must capture all those issues. Mr. Speaker, the fear also that you develop as national government a facility and hand over to county. Then sometimes another county government will come, or a governor who is petty, and the national government or leadership of national government want to have a function there, the members of parliament or whoever. Then they say, oh yeah, it cannot be approved because they have political difference with MP X or Y. So that MOU will have to provide all those mechanisms, Mr. Speaker, of how this relationship will be established, considering the investment that has been done by national government. That is the most important thing we are going to have with that MOU. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, that's why it is nice progressively that this study are owned by private entities so that they do not have consideration of this type of issues. Mr. Speaker, on the question of Honorable Mayaka asked something about the team that was stuck and protested in our offices and the airport. The Speaker, we realized that the team wanted to travel 6 days before the tournament. And there is nothing, Mr. Speaker, to go and prepare for Kabaddi when you are competing. So we had requested them that they travel at least 2 days before to have time to recover and then to play, and so that we can save the costs. We communicated that to their federations, and they were well aware. But you know, sometimes when people want just to raise their voice a little bit, they do certain things that may not be desirable. And the federation said that they did not instruct their players to do what they did. And we thought that was an act of indiscipline. But nevertheless, we continue supporting them, and they are now out of the country participating in the tournament. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Zamzam has talked about the FKF elections. When we go to office, one of the things I promised during vetting here in this house is that I was going to do everything possible to make sure that they do elections in the first place. So I'm happy we have an elections day. Now, we have the elections board, which is part of the regulations of FKF law. Mr. Speaker, I am going to have a meeting with the board to see if we can lend them neutral facilities, government facilities to operate their elections from, and whether we can also find ways of supporting them technically with IEBC so that the elections is as transparent as possible. That's the conversation we are having. And the stakeholders are busy now, the candidates are busy campaigning. Our desire is to deliver credible elections. We know that it is not government per se that is in charge of the elections, but our oversight responsibility and the Office of the Registrar is working very hard to make sure that that independence is achieved. We really want a properly working in FKF that has the credibility and the confidence of the stakeholders so that football can reach the stature that the people of Kenya want it to reach. And so that I promise that I will make sure that we deal with that. On the grassroots football support, again, apart from the Kenya Academy of Sports not having resources to deal with these academies in different places, the rest, you know, sports is private. Let's put it there first. Sports is a private venture. It's like business. If we look at it from a business perspective, until the day you are coming to compete on behalf of your country, the rest is a private business, and we must see it as business. And we want to support it the way we support other businesses, MSMEs and all that, you know, as a country. That's why we must have multiple ways of achieving it. The best entities, grassroots entities for developing sports is schools. That is why we want to sit down with the Ministry of Sports to make sure that the schools provide opportunity for nurturing talent. The rest of club football should outrightly be private. They should raise resources. They should run their footballs very well, have funding and take advertisements and all other mechanisms. But when it comes to nurturing, if we focus on schools alone, no part of Kenya will be left out. But if we focus on building a place where that training will only happen, few places can be constructed in the country. Schools all over the world, and I say this recently when we were having a NOC review of the Paris. In the US, I was told, and a statistic which I still have, the US universities contributed 3,000 athletes who went to compete in Olympics? Universities. While our universities in Kenya do not contribute even one. We have a problem of transiting from primary, it's okay. Secondary, even when we fund it from using sports fund, they produce the best sports people. After high school, we have very few athletes that are competing that are in universities. In fact, the only sport that has managed to have that caliber of athletes is rugby. The rest, the rest of the sports, football, athletics, and so forth, we do not have proper programs that take place in our colleges and universities. Again, I promised, and we are going to do this, that in the sports policy, we must strengthen education. In fact, in other countries, the Ministry of Sports, the Department of Sports, is called the Ministry of Education and Sports, because education and sports going together makes it possible for us to develop this talent. Key among them is working with the schools for equality and equity. The other issue is raised by Honorable Raso is on the question of being strategic. That is why you see in the bigger stadia, we are just constructing one per region. The ones for 10,000, 15,000, we are focusing on regions. And you are right, in the entire Northeastern region, there is no one stadium. Out of, for example, affirmative action, we need to have one that will be used in that region, and the talent is there. And then, make sure that every region is taken care of. Before now, we can move to counties. The rest is to leave county governments and private sector to construct the rest of the stadia. And slowly, government should maybe keep 2 or 3 national government. The rest either run by counties or private sector and clubs. If we had thriving clubs like Gor Mahia, AFC, Ulinzi, Shabana, or so forth, they would buy these clubs from government, pay back to the government, and they own it, and then it would be used for sports. That's why it's important to develop the sport itself, because that sport can be able then to facilitate the infrastructure that we need. Mr. Speaker, on the Marsabit one, there was inordinate delay. I already captured that in my report. Marsabit, Kinoru, Kamarin, among others. But as I promised, this will be, by the time I come back here to speak about sports again and sports infrastructure, I think the pending infrastructure will have either been commissioned to start for the ones which have not started like Kamarin, or we should be completing and handing over Marsabit. As we speak now, our officers are on their way to Marsabit to assess how much it will cost to complete the Marsabit one. And again, technical advice from Sports Kenya to make sure that can the grass grow in that area, or we use AstroTurf, or what are we going to do in terms of those pitches? Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with the honorable member that we should not spread ourselves thin when it comes to the infrastructure. Thank you.
Good. KJ?
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And I also want to thank Waziri Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen for appearing here and also fielding these questions. Mr. Speaker, my questions are very direct. One, what plans does the ministry have for the people of Ngando Ward? Ngando Ward is a ward in Nairobi County which has got not a single public amenity. The only public amenity we have there is a school called Lenana School. Now, the people of Ngando Ward have traditionally been crossing the road, Ngong Road, and going to play in what we used to call poster grounds. It is on these poster grounds that the new stadium is being built. Now, two tragedies are occasioned on our people. One, the workforce that is working there is imported from elsewhere. So the people of Ngando Ward are just watching as these projects are going on. What plans does the ministry have to include our people so that they can also serve their community in the constructions of this stadium? And two, all the up-bet schools, because now is when Ngando is getting its first public primary school, all the up-bet schools in this ward use the poster grounds as their playing field. So we do not have any fields in all of Ngando Ward, and now they're building a stadium there. The question is, what plans does the ministry have for these tens of thousands of children who have traditionally been playing in that field? Mr. Speaker, the second question is a quick one, is to ask, is the ministry aware that there are office bearers of FKF who are insisting that they shall go into the election beyond their constitutional timelines, beyond their constitutional tenures, arguing that their tenures were interrupted by the COVID pandemic. Mr. Speaker, you know, even yourself, you are a senator, and your tenure must have been interrupted. So was mine. So was the tenure of His Excellency the President Emeritus Uhuru Kenyatta. But he did not insist that he shall go beyond his constitutional tenure just because it has been interrupted by COVID. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to know what the ministry is doing about this, because we would not want this ministry to fall captive of the federations like previous ministries have done. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Millie?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, CS. Mr. Speaker, I heard the CS speaking very well about the